Well, candidates are making their final pushes in Nevada ahead of the First in the West caucus tomorrow. The state's Democratic Party says about 75,000 people have already taken part in early voting. The newest poll out of the Silver State shows Senator Bernie Sanders with a double-digit lead, Pete Buttigieg in second with 17% support. CBS News political correspondent Ed O'Keefe has more on the candidates' last-minute pitches.
The fact is, Bernie has had a very different record than me for a long time.
Former Vice President Joe Biden is calling out Senator Bernie Sanders' past opposition to legislation that would have toughened gun laws.
He voted against it 5 times in the House of Representatives.
And in a state still reeling from one of the worst mass shootings in history, Biden's campaign also unveiled this ad.
I don't know that you hold a gun manufacturer responsible for what obviously a deranged person does.
Sanders has since reversed that position, and on Thursday was endorsed by the co-founders of the gun control group March for Our Lives.
I'm proudly endorsing Bernie Sanders for president because he understands the actions that must be taken to curb this issue.
Also new today, another anti-Sanders ad from a moderate Democratic group raising concerns about the health of the 78-year-old senator.
Oh, and he recently just had a heart attack.
Biden isn't the only candidate taking swipes at Sanders.
If we choose a candidate who appeals to a small base like Senator Sanders, it will be a fatal error.
Speaking of the former New York City mayor, after a tough debate performance this week, Mike Bloomberg is scheduled to be off the campaign trail in the coming days, preparing for next Tuesday's debate. But Senator Elizabeth Warren once again called on Bloomberg to release former employees from non-disclosure agreements.
If he's not willing to remove those gags and let those women and maybe those men talk, then he is disqualified from being president of the United States.
Warren, after disappointing showings in Iowa and New Hampshire, is facing her own questions about whether she can turn things around in Nevada.
I need to do what I've done pretty much all my life, and that is get out there and fight for working families. That's me. That's what I do.
For more, I'm joined by CBSN political reporter Catilin Huey-Burns, who's in Las Vegas. So, Catilin, remind us again, how do these caucuses work?
Hi, Rena. Well, the caucuses work much like the Iowa caucuses were designed to work, which means you get into a room and you group based on your first presidential preference. So if your candidate gets 15% of the people in the room, your candidate is viable and is in position to get delegates. If not, you are able to realign with another candidate. Now, the field has narrowed a bit since Iowa, so there are fewer candidates participating here, but that is kind of how it's supposed to go. Some other factors, though, that are new this time around that voters here are considering is the early vote. The Nevada State Party allowed people to vote early for 4 days earlier this week. That number was about 75,000 people showed up for that early vote. That's important to consider because the turnout in 2016 was about 84,000 people total. So the party is pleased with that early vote return. When you early voted, you picked your presidential preferences, and those will now be calculated into the calculations for caucus day. So the Nevada State Party is trying to say that things will run pretty smoothly. They know that they are kind of in the shadow of the Iowa caucuses, which were described as nothing but chaotic. So there is a lot of pressure here in Nevada, and there's a lot of pressure, too, because this is the first time that these candidates are facing a much more diverse electorate. About 30% of residents here are Latino. That's why you've seen a lot of candidates focused on that vote. The other thing that is different this time around compared to last campaigns is that they are offering those who work in the casino industry, we're here near the Strip, locations to caucus on Saturday so that you can leave your workplace and go over quickly and caucus and then return to work. So the idea that the Nevada State Party is trying to stress is accessibility, which is often hard in a caucus, but they're trying to prove their first in the West status here.
Wow, that's incredible that they're allowing these workers to go. So important and says a lot about how seriously they're taking this. I want to ask you about Bernie Sanders, Catilin. You know, he lost Nevada to Hillary Clinton in 2016. He's got a great deal of momentum this year coming out of the debates, the New Hampshire primary. The polls are on his side. What's his team doing this go round to make sure he secures his standing?
It's an interesting comparison because Hillary Clinton in 2016 looked to the Nevada caucuses to give her a boost after a real loss, significant loss to Bernie Sanders in New Hampshire. Now that's kind of reversed. Bernie Sanders is coming off of a big win in New Hampshire, trying to consolidate some support here in Nevada and expand upon his base. We were actually out canvassing, following some canvassers in a Latino neighborhood in East Las Vegas with the Bernie Sanders campaign. They've been knocking on lots of doors, having Spanish language canvassers go to people's homes, encourage them to come out to caucus. The big issue that we heard while we were following these canvassers was the issue of health care. Of course, Medicare for All is a key part of Bernie Sanders' campaign, something he's been running on since 2016. We heard interest in health care costs, concern about health care costs from those that were answering the doors. Another item to consider is that one of the folks that answered the door said that, yeah, he'd like to caucus, but he would need a ride to the caucus location. So the canvassers took down his address, made sure that he would get a ride on caucus day. So you know how these things work. It's all about organization. That is something that is the reason why Bernie Sanders is poised to do well here. He's already looking on to the Super Tuesday states. Tomorrow he'll be in Texas.
Wow, it's so telling that they're even offering rides to people to make sure they get to the polls. That's so interesting, get to their caucuses. I want to ask you, though, Nevada's Democratic Party was originally supposed to use that same app that caused problems in the Iowa caucus. What's Nevada doing differently tomorrow? Will there be any sort of digital component for reporting these results?
That's right. The state party is pleased to report that there will not be an app for the caucuses this time around, given what happened in Iowa. They scratched that plan. They are distributing about 2,000 iPads across the precincts in Nevada. Those iPads are loaded with what's called a caucus calculator. Say that 3 times fast, which has kind of a Google form that you'll be inputting the results. They also have a paper backup system. So they are trying to say that this process will move smoothly, that they have backup plans. I was going through the long list of instructions about how to upload the results onto this caucus calculator, and they're very detailed. They even tell you how to actually turn on an iPad by pressing the home button. So that's what they're trying to do here, is make this as detailed as possible for those precinct captains so that there are no errors. The candidates are, going to take that into consideration. I asked Amy Klobuchar the other night if she's concerned about the Nevada caucuses compared to Iowa, and she said, we're in Las Vegas. I think they know how to count.
Well said. Catilin Huey-Burns, I want to thank you very much for joining us from Sin City. And I want to bring in Antjuan Seawright. He's a CBS News political contributor and Democratic strategist. So I want to move on out to the next, beyond Nevada, going to South Carolina, your home state. That's right. So, when you look at the latest polls here, South Carolina primaries, February 29th, right? Joe Biden had the lead. It's a shame for him that this primary wasn't in September because he had a double-digit lead. It was much better. His support is winnowing, but do you think it's enough to carry him through?
Well, first of all, early voting has started in South Carolina, so I anticipate there will be high enthusiasm in South Carolina because I think people realize if and when there is a reset in this process, it will be in South Carolina. I think from the very beginning, the Biden campaign was building infrastructure for it to be a marathon, not a sprint. And I've said publicly, for his success, direction was far more important than speed. And so here we are with the direction, not the speed. The direction will land him in South Carolina. The thing about Joe Biden versus other candidates is he's familiar territory. It's like his second home. He wears the white jersey when he comes to South Carolina. And we see that in the way he communicates with voters. And we see that in the polling. No matter what has happened other places, South Carolina has been the glue to hold the national campaign together, in my opinion.
This is your home state.
That's right.
What are African-American voters saying? What do they want? What are they looking for?
Well, I think it's been consistent. They are looking for someone who can not only beat Donald Trump, but put together the needed and necessary coalition of voters to bring this country back on track. That means winning up and down the ballot. Number two, I think they want someone who can speak very loudly and advocate and understand the issues that have far too long challenged and in so many ways taken our community back. Number three, I think they want authenticity. They want someone they can trust and reliability. And I think that's not just true for South Carolina, but that's true also for Super Tuesday, because Black and brown people will have a very loud say-so and who collects delegates and who gets victories on Super Tuesday.
want to ask you about those delegates.
Math.
Math. It always comes back to math with you and me. When we're talking about these delegates, more and more we're hearing about a brokered convention.
Yeah.
What are folks in the Democratic Party saying? Is that more likely a scenario as you look at the numbers?
I think by virtue of how this race is shaking out, I think it will be malpractice for anyone not to anticipate the possibility of a brokered convention. It takes 1,991 delegates, I think, to win on first ballot. So far, 65 have been awarded. 48 will be awarded in Nevada. 54 in South Carolina on Super Tuesday. There will be 1,344 total awarded on Super Tuesday. So we're a long ways away from getting to the magic number, but I do think someone who can catch the right political magic can take what it needs and be well on their way to collecting the needed number of necessary delegates.
All right, and I'm going to have you here all day tomorrow.
I can't wait to be with you.
We look forward to it.
Happy Saturday early.
That's right. I'll pack lots of snacks. Thanks for joining us, Antjuan.